I'm Mel.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Beck. And this is We Are Woman.
The nervous system is something all of us are living inside of every single day, whether we've ever learned about it or not. It shapes how we respond to stress, how we rest, how we connect, and how we move through the world. And while there's so much valuable education and research emerging in this space, we're also really interested in something just as important. What does the nervous system feel like, moment to moment, in everyday life? Today's conversation is about bringing understanding and lived experience together. We'll touch on the science where it helps give context and clarity, and we're equally interested in helping you notice your own system, how it speaks to you, how it responds, and what it needs. Because your nervous system isn't abstract, it's personal. It shows up in your breath and your energy, your focus and your rest. It speaks in sensations long before it speaks in words. We'll explore simple, familiar moments, coffee, scrolling, switching off at the end of the day, and we'll use them as doorways into understanding what activation, settling, and rest actually feel like in the body. You don't need to analyze yourself as you listen. You can just notice. Notice what resonates, what lands, and what your body recognizes. This is about awareness, and awareness is where real nervous system understanding begins. Let's start there. When we decided to start this conversation, I actually asked myself, where do you even begin with the nervous system? And what came up for me was how little I used to think about it. I didn't feel connected to my nervous system. I didn't have language for it. It wasn't really something I related to. And yet looking back, it was communicating with me all the time, through tension, busyness, staying on, never knowing how to rest. So I'm curious, Beck and Sarah, before this language entered your world or before the nervous system became such a thing in the wellness space, what did the nervous system mean to you, if anything, or did you feel connected to yours?
I didn't have the language for it initially, but it was always there and it was always talking to me. So there are a few signs that many of our listeners would probably have their own experiences, but definitely would be able to relate to things like always walking around, it felt like I was always walking around with a constant tightness,
Mm,
just sitting up in my diaphragm, and how that would present would be difficulty in getting a full breath in. So as I breathe in, the diaphragm constricts and gets tighter. And I just thought that was the way we all walked around, right? Thought that's the way everyone did things. So there was this constant tightness in my diaphragm that was certainly, as I look back now, working with nervous systems, messages from my own nervous system. But there were other things as well. I've spoken about before my sleep issues, just really not being able to sleep a full night's sleep. I know we all wake up from time to time, but I would typically be awake much more than I would be asleep. And not just awake, I would be awake and alert and ready for action if anything were to occur as well. So there was a level of fatigue as well related to that, that no matter how much I was eating right, doing the so-called right things, obviously trying to get my sleep in order, nothing felt like it was helping support my fatigue. So there was a lot of wired and tired, so to speak, as well. So yeah, I didn't necessarily have the language for it when I was younger, but it was always speaking to me. I look back
Mm.
now and I notice that the nervous system was there with a lot of messaging. I just really wasn't listening to it.
Yeah, I think similar to you, Beck, I didn't really have language for it, for the nervous system, and definitely didn't have the lenses that I can look through now when it comes to the nervous system. So really more looking through the lens of polyvagal theory and really, really understanding the depth of really what this system really is doing for us moment by moment. But yeah, I had a felt sense of just wellness in my body. And when I say wellness, like or not feeling well, right? But just a sense of like, when do I feel good and when do I not feel good, right? And I guess I had a felt sense of that through a variety of things, a variety of like, if I was exercising, I would notice I would feel regulated. I wouldn't use the word regulated, I would just feel good, right? That, I guess that was just the vocabulary that I had at the time when I was a child, when I, yeah, slept well, ate well, exercised well, did lots of things that I enjoyed doing with friends and family and other things, I would feel this sense of what I would now probably describe as just contentment and peace, until I didn't anymore. And I think for me, that became, again, like I'm referencing the modeling industry a lot, but that is just the thing in my life that really turned that around for me, which is where I started to become more dysregulated, so to speak, and my nervous system started to become more dysregulated. So I think I had a reference point, and I still have a reference point of what felt like a really healthy, regulated nervous system. And then it almost went the complete opposite into a very unhealthy, unregulated nervous system with just lots of stress on the system. And so, yeah, I guess that those are my reference points. I use obviously my own body as my reference point of how do I feel? But yeah, when I use this word regulation, which is a word that's a bit of a buzzword as well, right? We use that word a lot, but really what it is just a sense of homeostasis, a sense of calmness in the body, and a sense of like all the systems are working well together. Yeah, there's like, for me personally, that's how I've experienced that. It's a certain feeling of harmony. Yeah. And so And so, yeah, I guess that has been my experience of just my experience of feeling my own body and applying that and understanding how that works maybe for others with their own unique experience is a whole other, lens that gets to be applied to that. But yeah, I guess that's my initial response to that. It's like it's this
Mm.
system in the body that, for me, that is a felt sense of either things are in harmony or working well, or there's somewhat out of harmony and not working well, and that then results in, yeah, stress or fear or overwhelm or worry or feeling really down or feeling too up, like, and I kind of can feel, where am I too up or am I too down, kind of thing, compared to also what my maybe context in my life needs. And when I'm in that state of homeostasis more, it's a very different experience of life. Like literally everything feels different, right? So I've really come to see through my own body that how important the nervous system plays a role in terms of the quality of our thinking and feeling, and also the choices we make or don't make, or just how we perceive life, like in its totality.
Mm.
Yeah.
What's really important, and I know in this episode, we're not going to get too deep into the science of the nervous system because there are already a lot of places people can go for that science. But just to be really clear that when we're talking about the nervous system in this episode, we're mostly talking about the autonomic nervous system, which is different to the central nervous system. So, as you're sitting here listening, you might have heard of the central nervous system. It's sort of the brain and the spinal cord, and it helps us to make sense of the world through the top-down messaging, specifically analysis, thinking, all of that information that's coming through. Whereas the autonomic nervous system, it works automatically through lots of branches through our body, through the vagus nerve, and it responds to threat and safety messages through things like our breath, our heart, our muscles, our gut. I mentioned through the vagus nerve, it's one of the reasons why this system influences us so much, because there are so many branches of the vagus nerve that travel throughout our entire body, up into our heart, into our lungs, our gut, our throat, our face. We are seeing lots of vagus nerve stimulators that are stimulating from behind the ear here as well. And all of this is carrying information from our body up to our brain. So a huge amount of the information that comes through the autonomic nervous system actually comes bottom up. Around about 80% of the messaging comes bottom up, which is why, as we're going to talk about today, it's so important to really connect in with sensation in our body, because that's actually more of the messaging than what's coming from our brain down to our body. So I just wanted to, while we're early on in the conversation, really get clear between the what we're talking about today, which we can have conversations about the central nervous system, but today we're really talking about it from that lens of the autonomic nervous system and sensation.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that in, Beck. I think it's, probably super helpful just to, gently name what we mean when we say the nervous system. And I love that you bring in, the thinking as well as the bodily sensations. If I could put this sort of into an everyday moment that I'll share, and please reflect back what you hear from me, both Beck and Sarah, but I was noticing this morning how when my system is spiraling, my instinct is to think harder. And we've mentioned this on our podcasts before, on our episodes, but you can't think your way out of overthinking, and you can't spiral your way out of spiraling. And what I actually think feels really courageous is noticing the thoughts, like noticing the thinking system being on, feeling it, and then saying, I'm going to disrupt this pattern. And for me this morning, it was almost as if I made a decision to consciously engage more of that bottom up approach. So instead of trying to solve my spiraling and my overthinking this morning with more thinking and from a cognitive level, I thought, what can I do here? And when we talk about engaging the body and speaking to that system that responds from the regulation, it's going for a walk or looking at the horizon, broadening your view, looking at a tree. I know we don't all have, access to nature straight away, or we can't just step out onto the beach, but by engaging the autonomic nervous system and bringing in ways to regulate yourself without thinking and without the mind. And I think that's, if I could define the nervous system and reflect back to what you just said, but put it into like an everyday example, it's like the regulation can come from not figuring it out, but from letting the nervous system settle enough and coming from that place there, from that bottom up approach.
Yeah, I love that you're speaking to that thinking quality, right? So the mind is this super powerful system, really, that is creating meaning out of sensation. There's usefulness to thinking in some ways, but also there's a lot of just noise in our minds. And I believe that, on my lens that I work with, like sort of the thinking, feeling body or being, is that the thinking is simply a way of not feeling something. Like, it's a strategy of getting out of our feeling space. And it's a strategy of going into meaning making and story and memory, as opposed to actually just sitting in sensation and in feeling. Yeah, if we look at feelings, what are feelings really, right? It's like, it's energy in motion that's running through the body. And that's what we call then emotions, energy, emotions. And so the thinking mind is there as a way of trying to make sense of those feelings or trying to understand it. But also in some way, it's wrapping it up in some concept because that often feels safer for us to then process the actual sensation of the energy. Well, it's what I do a lot with my clients, and I guess what we do, like I do that in mind somatic work, but I guess that's what we do in breath work as well. We actually go out of the story of mind and really drop into the body and into the sensing space, and then we can start to work with the actual energetic component of the body and the feelings and how that is so much closer and deeper to maybe our primal way of living. And I guess that might be where the nervous system comes in as well, which is where, yeah, particularly as we start to look through the lens of polyvagal theory, which is really the lens of the nervous system responding to our environment moment by moment and creating fight, flight, freeze responses moment by moment. And it just depends on whether we get to move through those states, which is because it's actually a super intelligent system to be in fight, flight, or freeze. But it's whether we get to move through that state and then come to a completion and then return back to homeostasis. And what we're working with in breathwork, which is super fascinating, is layers and layers of unprocessed energy, essentially. And that shows itself then, like it sits in the body, in the nervous system, but it's also our meaning making about the nervous system. And so we need to look at the full picture of that if we want to sort of resolve, say, trauma or experiences from the past. And so the nervous system as a lens to look through, as well as really understanding it's all energy, like the emotions, the thoughts, but also the nervous system responses. It's all energy. We can potentially look at this system through a different lens, and we can start to relate to it in a different way. That anything that we maybe call dysregulation is simply a momentary experience that needs to move through the body if we allow it to. And so I guess what I'm sharing there also is that with breathwork, we're not necessarily looking for regulation. We're more looking for a lens of curiosity and moving with the energy that's there. And as a result, what will happen is regulation or homeostasis, but we're not wanting regulation. And I think that might be, I guess maybe particularly with social media now becoming more health conscious and it's a lot around like a regulation, right? Like regulate yourself and this and that. And it's that there's usefulness in it and it's true, but it also can become this self-fulfilling prophecy, really, where we feel like we need to regulate ourselves. And so the moment we're dysregulated, something must be wrong, right? Well, it's no. Like it's all working perfectly. And I think I guess I'll bring in that lens of that's how how I work with my clients, how I would love us to view the nervous system and really the function that it's here for us to do, and really how it's really serving us moment by moment, and that all of this work is around a deeper listening to that, a deeper just being with that. Yeah.
And it's so interesting that you described that as well, because I was listening to Mel talk about, I wanted to make sense of that. And that makes sense. For me, everything makes sense through the lens of the nervous system. And that sort of wanting to, that's a control piece, right? Because not knowing and being able to sit in our body is sitting in ambiguity, which a lot of us don't feel comfortable sitting in ambiguity or will have low tolerance for ambiguity. But I really also love what you described there, Sarah, because then we try and make sense of it and we try and quickly regulate it. And it seems like in social media at the moment, there's this propensity to, as you described, always be regulated. But then is that not just another cognitive distortion or pattern that we're running, that we can't sit in discomfort when discomfort arises? And discomfort will arise in our lives. This is part of the human experience. So to be able to work with someone like yourself, Sarah, or Mel or I, and learn to be in that discomfort, be able to be in that quote unquote dysregulation and be okay in that and feel safe in that and find safety in that and know what that feeling is and know that I can move through that and I will eventually get back and find my window of regulation, or in polyvagal you might refer to it as window of tolerance, and find my way back there and be in the ebbs and flows of the nervous system. That is so much more powerful than what I'm seeing on social media, which is regulate, 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 always be back in regulation. So I love how, Mel, you spoke to my natural tendency is to think it through, because I think we all do, because again, control and avoiding ambiguity and wanting to get back into that place of knowing. But I really love what you described, Sarah. It's so important. Yes, we do need to know what it feels like to be regulated, and we do need to know, or we should know, how to come back to regulation, but also to be able to sit in the hyper arousal, the really high highs or the low lows, and be out of regulation or dysregulated and be okay and safe in that is important too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I guess that's part of the work that we're doing, right? Like
Mm.
we're learning how to gently stretch ourselves or find bigger ground, so to speak, within our body. And sometimes yeah, we're gonna be uncomfortable either because we're just above our, like we're in either in hyper arousal or hypo arousal. And that is actually such an important part for us to really grow and expand as humans and really create more capacity within our bodies. And also, of course, recognizing that if that happens in a particular way for too long of a period of time, yeah, or if it happens through a single event trauma where it's just like bam and it's just too far out of the window of tolerance, that's where we can start to experience chronic dysregulation, right? And those are some of the cases that we work with, because some people are so have experienced so much stress in their life, and maybe some of you can, as you listen, you can resonate with this, that there's so much stress you don't even really know what it feels like to just feel a simple sense of safety. Yeah. And so I just want to speak to that because it feels important to honor that. But yeah, like essentially, I mean, what is safety? We can inquire into that. Like what is that really, right? And from my lens, it's safety is the capacity to be with the variety of different colors and flavors of states within my being. If I can, if I feel unsafe in some way in the world, yeah, I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna be like, is there something actually unsafe in my environment right now? Like, is there actually something like a threat in my environment right now? And if that's not the case, which is 99% of the time in my case, then okay, what in myself am I not feeling safe about feeling about myself? Yeah. And what story or narrative have I created around keeping me somewhat, quote unquote, safe in some other strategy or protective mechanism? And so if you feel a sense of unsafety in yourself, and maybe for some of the listeners here today, if you feel qualities or sensations that feel scary or overwhelming or, yeah, quote unquote, unsafe, that is the opportunity to actually be like, what is this really about? You know, what's this really about? And in that inquiry, you can find deeper truths about yourself. Yeah. So deeper layers of really what is feeling so scary? Yeah. Is it if I let go too much, things will totally fall apart and I won't be able to do my job anymore? If I let go too much in my relationship, will I somehow not be loved and will someone leave me? If I don't over manage my children and try to control their every move, are they going to be okay? Right. And so we can work with stories and we can work with meaning in a way that actually supports us. And then ultimately we want to drop even deeper into what is the real sensation and energy in the body, and how is my nervous system presenting this story in my mind? Yeah. So, for example, is there a contraction in my shoulders? Is there like a coming inward? Is there a holding of the jaw? Is there shallow breathing? Is there a feeling maybe in the heart space or not in the gut space? And all of these are signals and signatures that we can start to work with to then feel that, yeah, how the nervous system is really actually working for us and the body is really working for us, and how we can then use that information to find deeper levels and layers of safety within ourselves. And to me, when we talk about the nervous system, we can't separate it from all of the other systems in the body, really. So we're talking also then about the endocrine system and and then obviously the thinking, feeling, emotional being, and then like all of these other layers, social, relationship, all of these other parts are here. But yeah, the nervous system in isolation is a signature of signals, right? If we just look at the nervous system, it's sending signals, little waves, little sparks of electricity, if you will, of nerves. It's sending signals through the body. And so what is that? Well, that is energy. And so how is this energy moving is our inquiry. And how is this energy moving and influencing my state? That is our inquiry. And that's how we can deepen our, yeah, in my opinion, our understanding of the nervous system and of ourselves as well.
It's such an important point that you raised, Sarah, because yeah, there's times where we are required to move back into regulation to be in safety, where there's instances of trauma, one-off instances or long-term trauma that's left us completely out of regulation. However, what you're describing and what I think a lot of us might be able to play with is as we just spend time with sensation, with that energy, noticing it, even if we're up in our hyperarousal or hyperarousal and we're out of regulation, we can actually grow our window of regulation by being there and witnessing it and feeling safety in that space. So we're able to expand what regulation feels like for us rather than rushing ourselves to get to a certain place. And really beautiful how you describe that, the art of slowing down and being with that energy and being with those signals. What is our body telling us? What are these signals? And what do they even feel like? And I described earlier this tightness in my diaphragm and the sort of not being able to breathe through it, or the tightening around breath. But what's it like just to be with that and breathe right into that and see if I can expand that rather than trying to fix it all the time and just staying.
It's funny, like I'll go back to what we were talking about, what happened with me this morning, and I only bring it in because I think it's such a beautiful everyday example, but it sort of summarizes what we've been speaking to, and I think it's that what actually, and I know we've just spoken about it, the point is not to regulate, but what ended up regulating me was my ability to sit with the feelings that were coming up. And I didn't go into trying to regulate. I just thought, and I don't say this lightly, there is sort of a courage it takes to step into that unknown and almost go, let's switch off the mind and access this from a body level. And recognizing the strategies that are online. My spiral this morning was almost bringing me into a panic attack, and it was based on the fact that I had to get everything done and I had so much to do. But then when I dropped into my body and I just felt the sensations, it's like it didn't really matter what was happening there. It was just staying with, oh, okay, so my heart's beating really fast. and my jaw is clenching, and I'm getting this pain in my shoulder that's running down into my back, and my breath is not exactly breathe. It wasn't like a deep breath. It was those short, shallow breaths. And I think there is, what comes up for me, there is a courage to be able to sit with that. There has to be a bit of courage there, because I think for me, those feelings can be a threat. Those sensations can be the very threat, despite the other things that I'm trying to control cognitively. The sensations themselves of what's happening in the body can feel like a threat as well. And I think it's being able to sit with that and finding safety in the sensations.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Mel. Yeah, it's because some of the sensations in the body can feel so threatening because they are so overwhelming, right? They're so big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly if we've had like, yeah, just lots of experiences in our life, just lots of emotional, we're such emotional beings actually, you know, and so much of it is also so suppressed, right? Like if we look at our whole society is pretty much designed to have us avoid ourselves, whether that's through, yeah, working, whether that's through TV watching, whether that's through drinking, smoking, but it could also be through, yeah, lots of yoga, you know, like anything can become a distraction. Food, social time, alone time, you name it, right? Coffee, all sorts of substances that we can either take or not take in order to quote unquote regulate ourselves, right? Because I actually believe this thing that we're talking about, like, I believe we're actually sort of unconsciously constantly looking for regulation. We're constantly looking for regulation on an unconscious level because it's like, cool, I'm going to have this drink now because it's going to make me feel better. Or I'm going to have this bit of food now because it's going to make me feel better. Or I'm going to call this friend because it's going to make me feel better. In my case, it was like, I'm going to work my ass off because it's going to make me feel better. Right. And if I like to actually not work for a bit, like if for me, not working for a month is like, ooh, the world is going to go down into, you know, is everything going to be safe? And it's like,
I hear
whoa.
you.
And I only really realized how much I was actually on some level addicted to work when I stopped doing it. It was like, whoa, this is pretty strong, this energy. And it's just, we've all found different strategies to make it feel like we are safe. And so I guess what we're exploring is also, or really what I'm starting to see through this conversation more clearly as well, as I'm openly inquiring about this on the spot, which is that we are constantly trying to regulate ourselves. That's actually what we're really constantly doing. And some of our attempts are, you could say, useful, and some of them are not so useful, right? But it's in the, maybe it's in the stopping of the trying through all these outside mechanisms. And actually what we're facilitating here, what we're obviously facilitating with breath work is like, can we start to come into such a sovereign and powerful place in ourselves where we use our own breath as our tool for coming home into homeostasis, right? And fuck, like nothing can really get to us then, right? Because our breath is always with us. So that is pretty powerful. If we can really hone that skill and harness that and learn how to use that in the right moments, in the right time, we become pretty powerful, right? Because whether something happens in our environment or something happens with work or other people, this or that, we can just stay really centered, right? And so I think that is the potential of this breath work and then the nervous system. If we look at it through those two lenses, it's like the breath is really becomes our quote unquote regulator, yeah, and becomes also our tool for real contentment and maybe satisfaction in some way, because we're also looking for all these outside stimulants to regulate us because somewhere we feel dissatisfied, right? And so we avoid the void. We avoid through different mechanisms outside of us having, yeah, doing this, doing that, having blah, blah, just staying busy, whatever, to avoid feeling ourselves, essentially, to avoid our own deeper being, which maybe at first also seems really empty, right? I mean, that was my experience when I started to drop more deeper into myself. I was like, whoa, this is very empty. There's like nothing here. And then I, of course, discovered there was a lot there. But yeah, like well, I guess what I'm pointing to here is like how the breath becomes a way back into deeper sovereignty within ourselves, and also deeper centeredness and trust, and true satisfaction and contentment, as opposed to all these other distractions outside of us.
It can almost be such a playful way to learn about our own bodies, our own sensations, what's going on. And I really love the way you described the sort of nothingness, because we've spoken about it, I think, in our safety episode, right? Around sometimes safety can feel like nothing because it just feels almost a steady and a nothingness. But we can frame that as a nothingness, or we can, through modalities like our FBR breath work and some of our beautiful somatic practices, really understand that that's steady, that's safety. And Mel described earlier what went on this morning and all the little moments and nuance of what was going on in her body. This is the playful exploration that FBR allows, to be able to sit with that and know, oh, okay, there's this sort of tightening of my jaw or my neck or whatever the experiences you had, which we, in our day to day, had we not stopped to explore that, would just be something that was there and we miss it and we move past it. So these practices are so important to allow us to connect with our nervous system. And as you said, Sarah, our nervous system is not standalone, even though I wanted to be clear as we're talking about things that will probably be relating to the autonomic nervous system. But it's not a standalone system. It's related to everything. And as you're getting good at noticing signals, you notice even simple signals that you might be missing. My daughter often doesn't tell me she needs the toilet until she's so desperate. We miss the signals beforehand, or we forget to have lunch because we don't notice that we're hungry or we're thirsty. So the benefits of FBR breathwork and somatic practices and all of these tools that we use are huge in allowing us to get really good at noticing, as we described, the first language of our body.
I love that you speak to that. One of my most exciting things is when I start breathing with a new client and you start to watch them waking up to the sensations in their body. And just through their shares at the end of a session, it might be, oh, how did you know my back was sore? Like, it feels so good now. And then, or they come back a couple of weeks later and share that, oh, my shoulders have felt so much better ever since I breathed. And you start bringing in more of an awareness together of what's happening in the body. And it just sort of flows from there, really. Then our clients and ourselves, because we too obviously have breathed ourselves, you just start noticing more in your body. And I can honestly say, we speak to my experience this morning and how I was sort of playfully tracking what was happening in my body. That all came about from being able to come back into my body through FBR breathwork and wake up those sensations. Or is it waking up, or is it just actually reconnecting back to those systems? It almost felt like a wire was just like it was plugged back in to the socket. And I'm like, oh, I can feel my body now. I can feel what happens in my body.
Yeah, I love that you're using that word waking up as well, Mel, because it's like we're trying to feel something, right? In the world. Like, we're trying to just feel something. Like, I'm gonna watch a movie so I can feel something, right? Or
yes,
I'm gonna go to this club so I can feel something, or I'm gonna go on this adventure so I can feel something, right? And so whatever that something is, right? And we all have different I guess, preferences around that, but we're just trying to feel something. And I guess what we're offering with this modality with FBR breathwork is like we can feel like the entire universe within ourselves if we're actually willing to go inward instead of looking externally for all of these things, right? And it doesn't mean to not have experiences in life, right? It doesn't mean to not go into the world and have beautiful experiences and do things, right, that we enjoy to do. But can we also be really satisfied and content within ourselves without that? I guess that's the real deeper inquiry, right? And so where is that moving? Like I notice in myself, for example, right? Like I notice this subtle moving away, just moving away from the present moment, just going somewhere. Yeah. And it is this coping strategy because probably something in me doesn't feel fully safe to just be here. And so I move away and I move into often the future in my case, but I've seen many people that also move into the past a lot. But the future in my case, where I go, what is the next thing? Am I going to go travel here? Am I going to get, or just like the next thing is even just a half an hour away when I get to have, yeah, my fix of coffee or whatever, right? I don't really drink coffee anymore. My fix of cacao, or even the next thing is the yoga class I'm about to do in an hour, or like it's just the next thing. And I guess like what we're really learning with breath work, or unlearning rather, is here it is, like it's right here for us, all of it. And can we pause and simply go inward, and true happiness and contentment can be found in that place. We don't have to look outside of ourselves. And I think that is the beauty of what I love so much about this work. And I guess particularly how I work as a practitioner, and I think like Meg and Belle, you guys have a very similar approach, is that as a practitioner, or as a maybe guide or teacher in this space, it's really just about connecting humans back into themselves. We are not here to offer anything that isn't already known, but the other knows everything already because it's in them, right? And so when I work with my clients, that's very much the lens I look through as well. It's like it's in you. Where's your wisdom in this, right? And it's just such a beautiful journey to actually see people come back into their own wisdom through their own selves. And our whole entire society and structure is set up to pull us out of that from a very young age, like the whole schooling system. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not sort of judging the schooling system, but I do want to highlight, I think, just the reality of the system that we're living in, which is that it is a lot about what can you know from the outside, put it inward, like put something out of you in yourself, knowledge, information, skills, whatever. But actually what we're doing is like, what is actually coming from the inside out? What wants to naturally express? And then we can go into, well, that's authenticity, right? What wants to naturally just come out in the form of maybe words, art or creation, in the way you want to move your body, in the way you want to dress. Like, are we dressed because we feel like dressing like that? Or is it because someone told us that is a nice color on us, or, whatever. And I guess it might seem a little bit off topic, but I'm using all these examples as a way of framing up this perception that wisdom lives outside of us. Was no, it lives within us. And I guess like in the breath work, we see a very clear and direct correlation between the breath and the nervous system, and how we breathe is directly affecting our nervous system and the other way around, right? So it's this beautiful interaction and conversation. And so really what I'm saying is like, when we can harness our breath, we can harness our nervous system, and that will influence everything about our perception of ourselves and the world and how we manage situations. And that's a powerful thing to realize. Yeah.
So powerful. I love that you're bringing in this idea, Sarah, of like, you really got me just before, and you just said, here it is. It's here. It's in us. It's not out there. It's not keeping up with work. It's not keeping up with what the world or the society has conditioned us to think that we have to do. And I think it's in the everyday moments myself through FBR breathwork, I realized how much I do avoid myself or distract myself from feeling that quote unquote emptiness that we spoke to before, but also how I just was trying to keep up with what I should be doing. So we speak to coffee. I drank coffee to keep myself moving, to keep myself activated, to keep moving forward and to keep up the productivity and the work rate of my day, because that's just what we do. And I needed coffee to keep doing that. And it's been quite a complicated relationship, me and coffee, because I've suddenly realized upon finding more within me, finding things that I didn't know were within me and I can regulate myself. Upon finding that, I suddenly realized just how dysregulating coffee was for a system that's already quite activated, but that I have what I need within me and it's no longer looking externally. Externally reaching out for the coffee, right, to keep myself going. Whereas upon realizing how much that wasn't serving me, realizing I have what I need in here anyway. And yeah, here it is. I love that, Sarah.
And when you're so close to your nervous system and you understand it moment to moment, then you can make choices around things as well. So having a coffee becomes a choice rather than I need it in order to get by
Yes.
in the morning
Yes.
as well, which I think is where you might have got to with your coffee.
I was using coffee to, yeah, as I said, to keep an already quite activated system activated. And it was something I was trying to explore and unpack. And why am I having this coffee? Why am I having this coffee? Is it to feel good or is it to keep me going? And I suddenly realized that we speak to addictions. I'd become addicted to the buzz and the activation. And that was definitely not serving me.
Mm.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that you're speaking to that back, that the choice becomes available, right? So with whether that's with the coffee, whether that is watching that Netflix movie, whether that is going into this relationship or into this workplace, like, do we do it from a place of choice, or do we do it somehow to feel a lack within ourselves, right? Somehow
Yeah.
we're missing something, and so I'm gonna do this thing that's gonna somehow fulfill me more fully. And sometimes we look, there's beauty in that as well, right? Like sometimes we kind of need to go after the thing in order to realize it's not actually doing that for us, and then there's a death in that or some sort of loss in that as well. But yeah, like really coming into the beauty of this moment and the beauty of
Mm,
us and ourselves within us, that if we can really connect to these deeper layers of wisdom within us, including the nervous system as this very wise, old, intelligent part within it, that is actually just simply responding to our state moment by moment. Yeah. And creating our state as well. Like, what's the chicken, what's the egg? It's an interesting one, right? But when we can really start to feel ourselves and our nervous system more fully, we can start to see actually everything I have right now is here. And
mm,
that is such a beautiful moment. It's just a beautiful place to live
mm.
in, right? It's such a beautiful place to live in, to feel so deeply content in your enoughness, really, in the enoughness of this moment and in the enoughness of the body and of itself. Yeah.
Something that I think is helpful for our listeners potentially is how do we how do we create space to be able to listen and learn that wisdom
Mm,
within? And you talked earlier, Sarah, about in that gap between all of the stimulus, when we stop, we then create space for creativity and understanding. Am I dressing this way because I like it? Or all of this stuff becomes alive and available to us. And something that I've been working with a number of clients with recently is this word boredom, we try and fill everything because if we're not doing something, we're bored. And actually, the reframe of boredom, right, is to be tranquil or to be serene. So why not cultivate an ability to sit in that space? Sometimes that might be through practices like meditation, but if our nervous system is highly activated, sort of in that hyper aroused state, sometimes we need movement rather than stillness in order to bring that down again. So we
Yep.
can choose modalities that are right for us. Sometimes it's going to be something like meditation. Sometimes it might be a meditative walk or hike. Breath work is beautiful because especially with the style FBR breath work, it moves between being activating and restful as well. So we can get both to be able to choose some modalities that can help us find the ability to be in that space of, I use the word boredom because that's the word that comes up with my clients, but really boredom is serenity. It is peace. It is that sort of tranquility. And when we get comfortable in that space, then it allows for all of the stuff that you described, Sarah. So I think an inquiry for our
Mm.
listeners could be, what are some of the ways in which you can cultivate intentional stillness, or not necessarily stillness, but intentional space?
Mm.
And in that, allow for what might arise, the awareness that comes up by allowing for that space, the creativity, the ideas and inspiration, the little pockets of light bulb moments of, oh, this is not what I want from life, or this is what I want, or this is how I want to work differently this year, that comes from cultivating that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you speak to this quality of boredom, right? Because when I work with a lot of clients, it is a very common experience. Like it's almost this fear of boredom. Yeah, the fear
Yeah.
of that spaciousness. Yeah, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand for me, for myself, for a very long time, it didn't feel safe to pause in that kind of a way. And even if I was pausing, so I was meditating or I was doing the thing that was supposedly like create more peace or whatever, I was still feeling like I was doing the doing of that. So it was still within the doing of the meditation or the doing of the yoga or the doing of the breath work, even. Right. And so I think what we're also really talking about here is like really coming into the beingness quality of ourselves and the spaciousness that comes with
Mm.
that. And yeah, initially, as we drop deeper into what we call maybe quote unquote boredom, right? Or into rather just the spaciousness of this moment, as we can drop deeper into those layers and frequencies, if you will, within ourselves, there is real existential fear that can arise and all sorts of other parts that can come to the surface that haven't been maybe addressed or looked at by the individual, that start to just come to the surface because it's just become so loud all of a sudden. This is what I've noticed in as I've gone deeper into the breathwork practice as well. The more I actually drop into deeper presence and spaciousness and awareness of my body, the actual parts that are not yet integrated of my psyche, of my being, become so loud because it just becomes
Mm-hmm.
super obvious that these
Mm.
parts are not yet integrated. And so it feels important to speak to that because it's a delicate dance between really coming into spaciousness and rest. And then whilst we're dropping deeper into that spaciousness and rest, acknowledging and really honoring the parts that maybe feel so scary that feel so scared to let go more fully, to trust more fully, to just let it go, like the exhale, right? Like actually dropping it out, just surrendering more, and feeling like we're truly being held. That's a big challenge, and for me still, it's like if I walk through life, that sometimes there's this feeling of like, oh, I need to kind of hold myself in this, like there's my identity, there's my self-structure, sort of like I need to do this myself, as opposed to like, no, I'm not separate from anything around me. I'm so fundamentally part of this whole. And that exhale, that stretch out and just allowing it. Yeah, I've encountered moments of real existential fear within the letting go of my parts and coming into deeper homeostasis. So I guess, yeah, when we talk about this topic of the nervous system as well, within that, it's the nervous system is potentially in fight, flight, freeze, and a combination of these elements, because certain emotional states simply haven't been acknowledged, right? And so the nervous system is in this tone of variety of levels of distraction, you can call, depending on the individual and what they've been through. And the more we drop, also sometimes the work is also when we drop deeper into an actual spaciousness, and we're going actually forward, it can feel the exact opposite, because an existential fear actually comes to the surface. Like, if I let go of this particular part, I'll literally die, right? Like that was my experience. And of course, I knew I wasn't going to die, but that was the felt experience of it. And so I guess I'm speaking to that because it also feels important that the three of us have gone through, I know for the two of you as well, we've gone through layers of this within ourselves. And
100%.
If any of you listeners are out there and you really want to explore this work, we are so ready to hold you in those spaces as well, because that is where it's at, that it's at that threshold moment where you feel like you're going to almost die, is where the breath in can start to move more freely and the breath out can drop more deeply. And that's the spaciousness. And then actually there's a birth in that moment as well. I'm not sure where I was going with all of that. I was just kind of going on a roll, but it just felt important to share.
No, I love it. I love it. I think it's so easy also, like even just to bring that back, how easy is it to not let yourself be bored these days? In this modern world, we've got scrolling on our phones, we've got Netflix where we pretend it's rest, but it's not because our body's still on, or we've got the situations where, I know for me in the past, I've been doing the resting, as you said. I've been doing the spaciousness. I haven't actually gone into that beautiful, healthy, we speak in FBR breathwork of like really deep rest and then potentially like a really healthy dorsal rest. And then, this isn't it. Scrolling's not that for me personally. Netflix isn't. And yeah, just not being able to switch off mentally, even though I may look like I've got the spaciousness or I'm resting, I'm not resting in that, or I haven't been in the past. And I think through FBR breathwork, I've been able to find that nervous system level of that spaciousness that you speak to, Sarah, or of that, and though meeting the parts, yes, that are dead scared of not being needed while I do my resting and nothing needing to be on. Like, what happens to those parts of me? So yes, I can definitely resonate with that. And I think that's something for me that was online and personally while I could have quote unquote rested, but was still tired because there was all that at play.
Yeah, there's a difference between real deep rest, right? And sort of this pretended rest, which is fair enough. We do that in a variety of ways. But yeah, like you spoke to Mel, yeah, we watch Netflix and our bodies maybe rest, but our mind is super active doing stuff, right? And how much time in our modern society do we actually I call it switch off, but it's actually also switching on, right? Because what I've noticed is the less I'm actually on my phone, the less I'm on, I hardly watch any movies these days, but the less I'm doing it and the more I'm actually present with, we've got a new puppy and she's very cute. And so the more I'm actually present with my puppy, And just walking in the grass, the more it felt like switching off. Like it's like, oh, I'm switching off. But now I'm starting to see, and it's slowly starting to come. I'm actually switching on. And that's why I loved what you were sharing before, Mel, around awakening, because it's like, no, I'm actually so much more present and aware of like the intricacy of little shapes in the flowers, leaves, and things like that. And I'm actually coming on rather than off. But I was so numb to all of that for such a long time. And then I consider myself to not even be that numb, right? If I look at like kind of like global society and the state of humanity and where most people, I guess, are living. But yeah, I even like sort of recently, since we got the puppy, I'm just noticing how much it brings me into actual presence and how I watch her, right? And she's kind of like sniffing. I'm like, wow, this beautiful creature is just so in the moment. There's nothing else going on for her than in that moment she's sniffing that leaf. And there's something so beautiful about that. And in that, I needed to grieve. I looked at that, right? I had the real moment of grief because it's like, wow, I actually have missed so many beautiful moments in my life because of just not realizing how distracted I was, just not being present fully, not really being there. And so I guess my work's dedication now is, I mean, it's always been to reduce suffering on this planet, to come more deeper into presence and love and actual contentment and feeling of aliveness within ourselves. But yeah, even recently that has even really deepened, I guess, like the realization around what that really means. And the nervous system is a fundament. The nervous system needs to be on board. Like I think we can, and that's what I love about breathwork as well, just circling back to that, because we can do all the meditating, we can do all the yoga and all the practices, right? And they're beautiful practices, right? And they are supporting the nervous system in so many ways as well, right? But personally, for me, what I found with breathwork, it's just an easier, faster tool into the actual regulation of the nervous system. And I know we don't need to regulate, etc., but it is a tool that really directly, the breath and the nervous system directly communicate with one another. So the moment we change our breath, the tone and the frequency of our nervous system changes. And we are doing more research now that's coming out that is really starting to show what happens to our brain states when we do breath work and when we focus on our breath, and what really happens within our body in that way. So breath work for me, and I see it in a lot of people, is a very powerful tool to actually address things. Because what I think might happen with maybe a yoga practice or things like that is that we kind of show up to the class, we do the practice, but are we really going into the actual fear that is even just distracting us from being present, right? And I think as long as we not actually address the blockage, the emotional blockage, whatever it may be, we're not going to get there through the practices. The part of the practice is, which I believe breathwork does in such a good way, is it actually addresses the thing that is not allowing us to fully feel ourselves and be in a moment. Yeah. So it is anyway, I don't really have much more to say on that, I think, in this moment. But yeah, curious to hear your thoughts on that as well, Beck. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really love what you're saying. And I think to maybe clarify that as well, when you're describing breath work, I think you're describing specifically FBR breath work.
Yeah.
And I say that because choosing the right breath work or choosing the wrong breath
Mhm.
work can also have consequences. If you're choosing something highly
Yes.
activated, it can really blow you out. But I 100% agree. And I think what really attracted me to FBR, what still does, is its ability to hold a person moment to moment where their nervous system is in that moment, in
Yes.
a way that's so different to
Mhm.
any other breath work that I've used before. But when we're talking about the nervous system, I think it's also important to really describe, this is why sequencing matters so much. when we're supporting people with their nervous system and finding regulation or supporting someone to go back into their window of regulation, window of tolerance, because I'm a psychotherapist, right? So I use top-down modalities. I also use hypnotherapy, which is a little bit of a mix of both, right? But I know many of my clients that have done therapy for years who are really well trained in those top-down approaches, who know all the language. And to your point, Sarah, they still can't stay with their bodies, or their bodies still feel really tense, or they feel tired and wired, or they still feel shut down, even though they've done years of therapy. They know all the right language and all the right things to say. And that's because our nervous system, as I said earlier, particularly through the vagus nerve, most of the information we know now, about 80% of the information comes bottom up. So our nervous system doesn't respond to logic first, it responds to sensation first. So practices like FBR breathwork are really important. And if we try and change our thoughts while our body's still in a state of being clenched or braced, or we're not connected to it, then our system can really resist that as well. So I think sequencing's really important. Sometimes sequencing starts right at the very beginning of the sequence, and really cultivating environmental safety. I mentioned recently about my client, which I was doing an exteroception exercise with. That's an exteroception exercise is just creating safety in our environment. That's probably the very first place to start when we're working with our nervous system. And she had an experience which I've had before, which is I feel nauseous when I do this exercise. Sometimes our environmental safety is lacking. So even when we start at the very beginning, even with those real baby steps, we might notice sensation come up, such as nausea or headaches or certain amounts of discomfort or pain. So, working our way through environmental safety before going into something that's more interoceptive, internally focused, which might be a somatic practice, FBR breath work, some of those choices as well. So sequencing really does matter when we're working with the nervous system. And from my perspective, what you described, Sarah, around breath work, it really does honor that sequencing in a way that certainly for me, none of the other modalities I use honors that sequencing so much. Other modalities become part of that sequence, but the journey that our
Mm.
clients go on, the journey that we go on when we go through that breath work journey, is really following that sequence.
Yeah, I love how you describe that back. And in the sequencing, we are welcoming the emotions in the different parts of us, right? So it's kind of like
Yeah,
in this
absolutely.
sequencing, we are, yeah, we are creating space for whatever it is that needs to and wants to be felt by us. And so, yeah, I love that you described that around the sequencing. That feels very important as quite a different part of how we work with breath in this modality, quite a unique way of how we work with breath and how we look at trauma and how we look at simply life events happening with us, to us, through us, as us, and how we are co-creating that moment by moment. And so I guess, yeah, the way we look at breath work is really as a way of more deeply coming into seeing also all of that, how everything is influencing one another. But yeah, I love the sequencing piece. That's quite a different way of how we work with breath, I believe. Yeah.
I think a beautiful thing about FBR breathwork also is that I think, Beck, you mentioned it just before. It really does meet the nervous system where it is on that day, and we do quite often say that we trust that you will get the journey that you need today, whatever is alive in that moment on that day. And I think it's also really good to mention that FBR breathwork doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't have to go into a journey looking for a huge cathartic release or a big regulating experience, or to process something. Sometimes it can be just as healthy to keep up an FBR practice just for a simple reset. I know that's also a buzzword in the nervous system industry right now, but just to go in, breathe with yourself, reset the nervous system, and then continue that. We do speak to, our treatment arcs, and I've got many clients who are in a treatment arc at the moment, whereby they're regularly engaging with the practice with me, where you can obviously go deeper, and there's many benefits to that. But each journey doesn't have to be a huge experience, that it can also just be a nervous system reset.
Yeah, we're both excavating content from the unconscious mind, and so we get to experience and be with parts of ourselves that are quite deep. And then at the same time, it's just a beautiful tool to keep the nervous system agile and flexible. Agile and flexible.
Agile, yeah.
And both of those can happen at the same time. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we've described really that a healthy nervous system is one that is flexible, that is able to move through all of these different states, that's able to feel all of these different sensations. And if we want to name them, feel all of these different emotions, and then to find homeostasis and come back to that place of regulation again. I wonder if, to wrap up our episode today, I might be able to share a tool with our listeners. And it's a really simple tool. We're not looking to necessarily change anything. We're just looking to maybe get to notice what we notice in our nervous system. So if you imagine a scale of 1 to 10, and your regulated nervous system might sit somewhere between 4 and 6, for example. So that's our homeostasis, our sort of central point that we come back to. Under that, between 1 and 3, maybe heading up to 4, would be hypoaroused. So that we didn't describe the states today as we said earlier, this wasn't necessarily the science episode, but you might call that dorsal vagal. And by the way, all states have polarities. So there's good and bad well, I don't like the terms good and bad, but there's things we feel on both sides in both. So you might need to just go into a complete state of recovery, and that might be dorsal vagal in its healthiest state. But you might also experience it as collapse or numbness or dissociation as well. So all of those experiences might be in the 1 to 3, 1 to 4 on your scale. So you've got that hypoarousal in 1 to 3, 1 to 4. You've got your state of regulation between 4 and 6. And then above that, you might be moving into hyperarousal, fight, flight, the sympathetic nervous system that we've described as well. And that might be anxiousness, inability to sit down, have to fill all the gaps, some of the stuff that we've spoken about today. And what can be really helpful is just to get to notice, where do I sit in any moment on that scale of 1 to 10? So as we utilize this tool, we can get really good at noticing, where is my nervous system sitting in this moment? You might use this as you wake up in the morning. I like to use it as part of my morning routine, just to sit with what's there. I notice sensation, and then I just take a little map of what's there, but also where am I sitting on the scale and in this moment as I wake up in the morning. So you might utilize it there. You might do that from time to time during the day or just as you go to bed, and you start to get really good at noticing your own nervous system. It's not about, as Sarah mentioned earlier, it's not about fixing things. It's not about changing where it is. We're simply getting to notice. We're becoming the root of all knowledge of what goes on in our own nervous system. So I just wanted to share that as a really simple tool that our listeners can use as they take away this from the episode today.
Thank you so much, Beck. What a beautiful offering. As we close this conversation, we want to remind you of something simple. Your nervous system isn't something you need to master. It's something you're already living inside of. For many of us, awareness is the first real shift. Noticing when we're activated, when we're settled, and when we're doing things that look like rest, but don't actually let the body land. Sometimes that awareness changes how coffee feels, or it changes how scrolling feels, or your relationship to boredom. Sometimes it simply helps us recognize the difference between off and being truly at rest. None of this is about doing life perfectly or regulating yourself all the time. It's about listening to energy and sensation, to the quiet signals your body has always been sending. For us, FBR breathwork has been one way of developing that listening. Not a technique to force calm, but as a way to feel what safety and settling actually are in the body. And from that place, things begin to shift naturally. If there's one thing we hope you take from today, it's this. You don't need to understand your nervous system to begin a relationship with it. You just need to notice. Notice what supports you, what keeps you wired, and what helps you land. We'll keep exploring this together, slowly, honestly, and in a way that honors real bodies living real lives. Thank you for being here with us. So that's all from us today. Thank you so much for tuning in to We Are Woman. I hope today's conversation gave you something to reflect on, to feel into, or to carry with you into the rest of your week. Please make sure to click subscribe on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss the latest episodes as they drop. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a woman that would find it helpful, because this isn't just our podcast, it's all of ours, together. You can also follow us on Instagram at We Are Woman Podcast to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join our growing sisterhood. We've got some very special events planned and would love for you to be a part of them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being exactly who you are.